house hauntings, things happening in their offices, things happening in their homes, or things happening in their apartments or condominiums, for that matter.
Daddy? Go f yourself, Jerry. Go f yourself. I'm not gonna stay here.
Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name.
Hi, thanks for tuning in to Armor of God again. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. And hopefully you'll find this video edifying. For this video, what I'd like to do is share a little bit of the 2 interviews I just did with Father Deacon Anthony and also Father Winston. With Father Deacon Anthony, I focused on spiritual warfare through the lens of Eastern Catholic tradition, and as for Father Winston, the interview focuses on the actual cases that he handled before. At the same time, I'm still waiting for replies or confirmation from other exorcists from other parts of the world, so that maybe by doing it this way, we can listen to a variety of these priests who are doing such an important job in their community for the faithful out there, and especially those who are struggling spiritually.
The scratches, that is what we call now, oftentimes, those are signs of oppression, attacks on the body. Okay? So scratches in any part of the body where the person is unaware. When he wakes up, he finds scratches on himself or herself. Now, I am assuming what you're saying is that the person does not scratch himself unaware, no? Because that is a possibility that you scratch yourself unaware, thinking, and then you wake up thinking that it is somebody else. So if you find that you have a scratch at your back and you can never reach your back, so you can assume that you had this. Now, succubus, incubus attacks is an attack on a person. So a woman that is attacked in her dreams is called an incubus. And a man that is attacked in his dreams is called a succubus. Why in his dreams? Because he's not aware. But sometimes one is also aware that he is being sexually attacked. So when one is sexually attacked, spirits do not have sex. Evil spirits do not have sex. So even a woman might experience being attacked by a male demon, but she can also be attacked by a female demon, a demon that pretends to be female, or a demon that pretends to be male. In the same token, that men can also be sexually attacked, meaning they experience that they are being sexually harassed or raped in that context, and they could not move, they are paralyzed. We call this night terrors, that the person cannot do anything, as if being paralyzed. And the person, the attacking evil spirit, would probably appear first and foremost, first as a beautiful woman or handsome man, and then seduce the person, and the person would eventually give in to the seduction and then start to do things, sexual acts. But then once the person they're already doing it, the demon manifests itself as a demon or as a monster. So those are succubus attacks and incubus attacks. Now, when you ask, why does that occur? How does that occur? If the house that the person lives in is infested by evil spirit, or that in the house where that occurred, the house has been used for evil purposes like orgies, sexual deviation, drug abuse, for example, or even for infidelities, perversities, then the house has been contaminated by a lustful spirit, which may affect a person that is sensitive or vulnerable if the person sleeps there. Okay, so that does happen. And when you ask why some persons are affected, in our experience, oftentimes if this occurs on a regular basis on a person, it is possible that the person had been sexually molested in the past by a human being. So the vulnerability is now there because of the emotional trauma. So this is what we often see in cases of frequent succubus or incubus attacks. And this can happen to anyone. It can happen to regular persons. It can happen to religious men. It can happen to religious women. So it's because it is rooted in the traumatic experience. So if a person had traumatic experience that is connected sexually, then it is possible that the incubus and succubus attacks are connected with that.
And then the following 2 clips are from my interview with Father Deacon Anthony. I must say the whole session with him was very interesting and I really learned a lot. In fact, I requested for another interview with him later in November, as well as with Father Winston in October.
So, the Catholic Church is actually a communion of 24 churches. And each of these 24 churches has its own way of doing things, its own traditions, its own heritage. But we're all one church. We're all united together. And the principle of unity is actually the Pope, the Bishop of Rome. So we all have the same Pope, Pope Francis, but we each have our own hierarchies with our own bishops. So I'm not under the Roman Catholic bishop. I have my own bishop. And then he is under a metropolitan in Philadelphia. And then we have our patriarch over in Kiev. But our patriarch is in full communion with the Pope, which makes us Catholic. So that's how that works. Very oftentimes in the Roman Catholic tradition, otherwise known as the Latin tradition, people get a little confused because the Pope actually has 3 separate roles. He is the bishop of the city of Rome. And as a bishop, he does the things that a bishop does over his diocese. So he's the bishop of the Diocese of Rome, but he's also the patriarch of the Latin Church, otherwise known as the Roman Catholic Church, which is the largest of the Catholic churches. But as well as that, he also is the principle of unity for the Universal Church. In other words, he's the Pope of the Universal Church. So those are actually 3 distinct roles. But in the Roman Catholic tradition, the Pope has a much more hands-on role because he's also the patriarch as well as the Pope. But in our tradition, we have our own patriarch, as do many of the Eastern Catholic churches. We have our own heads, our own hierarchies. So we're Catholic, we're in full communion with the Catholic Church, but we have our own way of doing things, we have our own bishops. But in the United States, there's a lot of confusion about Eastern Catholics, in part because we're small in number. We're growing in many places at least, but we're still small in number, and people oftentimes confuse us with Eastern Orthodox, which is understandable. We look exactly like the Eastern Orthodox, especially those of us in the Byzantine tradition. We do everything exactly like they do. The only difference between us and the Eastern Orthodox is that we're in communion with the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox are not. But a lot of Roman Catholics in this country don't seem to know that we exist, which is a little awkward at times, but a lot do. And those who do are very supportive. Like locally, the Roman Catholic diocese that I'm in geographically, we have a wonderful bishop here, and he loves the Eastern Catholic churches, and he does everything he can to support us. So do most of the priests in that diocese. They're very supportive of us and help us any chance they get. So, on the clergy level, we're typically on very good terms, and they help us out a lot. But among the laity, there isn't a lot of knowledge of who we are, and that leads to weird, confusing situations sometimes. Like a number of years ago, we had a festival in our little town where my church is located. And during the festival, we were giving tours of our church. And we're showing people around and explaining, the icon screen, how we do things. And I gave some of the tours, but I had to leave at a certain point. But there was another deacon in my parish, Father Deacon Chris, and he was giving the tours when I left. And he told me that there was an older couple who were Roman Catholic. They've been Roman Catholic their whole lives. And he was trying to explain that we're Catholic also. And they couldn't seem to grasp it. At one point, he was talking about how, we have the same Pope, Pope Francis. And the one lady said, "Oh, your Pope is named Francis. What a coincidence. Our Pope is named Francis too." He tried explaining that they're the same person, but she just couldn't grasp it. And then later on, he took her into like the entrance of the church, and we had a picture there of our patriarch, a picture of our bishop, and a picture of Pope Francis. And she said, "Wow, your Pope Francis looks just like our Pope Francis." So she just couldn't understand that we're actually the part of the same church. We're all one church. So that's the common misunderstanding. Well, if an Eastern Orthodox Christian comes to a Byzantine Catholic church like mine, it's exactly the same. The only difference is we pray for the Pope. So I have an Orthodox friend, a good buddy of mine, and he came to my parish one time with me. He's like, "Wow, that was exactly like my liturgy." I mean, the music was a little different. We may have a few different local traditions depending on where we're at, but it's the same divine liturgy, the same, layout of the church, the same way of administering the sacraments. I mean, to the outsider, you really can't tell the difference other than the fact that we pray for the Pope and the Orthodox do not.
I also asked him about the Desert Fathers as well.
The Desert Fathers, most of them went out right after Christianity was legalized by the Roman Empire. And part of the reason for that was when Christianity was legalized, a lot of people flooded into the church, not necessarily for the right reasons. It became almost like a trend or a fad. And Christianity in some places became really watered down. So the Desert Fathers were kind of rejecting that. They were rejecting society. They're rejecting how the church was being compromised in some places. But for many of them, it also was about spiritual warfare. And in the ancient world, the desert was seen as the place where spirits dwelt. That's where the demons were, in the desert. So if you went into the desert, you were expected to find supernatural things happening. And later on, when Christianity spread to Europe, the forest kind of took the place of the desert. You'd have people go into the forest to establish monasteries or to live as hermits because the forest was the magical place with the spiritual dangers. But yes, I mean, initially, one of the reasons they went out there was for spiritual warfare because, the desert was an arena. The monastery was an arena where you're battling against spiritual forces. And very often the spiritual forces would attack very directly. Like I said, when you live in a culture like ours, the devil has all kinds of ways of attacking you. He can get to you through the media, through other people. But when you're in the desert and there aren't many other people around and there's no media, there's no culture, sometimes the demons come at you very directly. They don't even bother hiding what they are. They just come at you, in demonic form, according to the tradition. And I think a lot of them were prepared for that. And yeah, that was one of the reasons they went out there to undergo this spiritual battle.
Now, I'll continue to share every part of the interview in the next several videos. But before we get to the end of this video though, since there are a lot of our Catholic brothers and sisters from the Philippines watching the videos here, I thought I asked Father Winston this question. What are the common cases that the exorcists in the Philippines often encounter?
So when you asked us what are the common, so after having had the statistics, what are usually the common cases that we encounter when it comes to oppression or possession? The most common would be the third eye. No? The third eye, where the person sees spirit, and these spirits now start to attack them in one way or the other, either emotionally or physically, or some of them experience partial possession where they know that the spirit is entering them, but they're still aware of their surroundings and they do not go into a trance. So these are common instances. And of course, when you talk about infestations, house hauntings, things happening in their offices, things happening in their homes, or things happening in their apartments or condominiums, for that matter. So those are what we usually are able to see, or things that are or cases that are referred to us.
And just before we get to the end of this video, just because Father Winston mentioned houses being haunted, demonic infestation happening at home, offices, etc., I'd like to share this example of a man who's been experiencing exactly what Father Winston just talked about there just now. And they're not Christians, and the attacks just got worse and more frequent that he had to send his wife and son to live with a relative while he stays alone at home to keep them away from the attacks. And judging by how he looks to be emotionally exhausted by these attacks, it's no laughing matter especially.
The fuck? Where's the cupboard open? The lights are off. You see, I normally keep that light on because that's how I get to know the haunting has begun or not. And that's why I've actually covered the lights so that it doesn't glare on my eyes while I'm sleeping. The cupboard is open right now. I'm alone in the room. It's at the door. Stop it! Stop it, please!
Daddy?
Go f yourself, Jerry. Go f yourself. I'm not gonna stay here. So I'm just waiting till 4 a.m. till the haunting finishes, and I'll go back home. You know, the good thing is, thank God, at least it doesn't happen every night. It's okay.
And I'm also thinking to ask one of the exorcists about this Indian family situation, and I would then like to share the answer or explanation of the priest to them later on. I think that's the best way I can help them for now. I do feel sorry for the family, because I also know a family that's experiencing something similar as well. I saw how the demonic infestations that took place at their home really affected them spiritually and physically. Well then, that will be all for the video this time. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. And hopefully all of you have learned a lot from this video. Remember, if there's any feedback or suggestion, please let us know in the comments below. Anyway, if you like what we do and you'd like to support us, I left a link to our PayPal donation in the description box below, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your continuous support, contributions, and prayers. I will always try my best to keep on delivering useful content for us all. Until the next one, thanks again for watching, and may God bless you.